My parents are both from the South. My mom is from Virginia and my dad is from Alabama. Let's start with my mom. My mom is the oldest of 2 children. My mom first experienced abandonment at her birth. When my Nana gave birth to my mom, she gave my mom to her grandmother to raise. So my Nana did not raise my mom for the first few years of her life. I think my mom said when she went back to live with my Nana, she was about 13, 14. In the window that my mom grew up without her mother, she was molested by a family member. She started feeling all types of rejection and abandonment because she always thought that no one wanted her. When my Nana had my uncle, which is my mom's brother, my mother immediately felt the sting of rejection again because my Nana raised my uncle. He grew up in the house. Like, he did not, get sent away to live with another family member. However, that happened to my mom. She was abandoned early. She felt rejection because her and her sibling was raised differently. Now it's this void in her life that she's trying to fill. Then my uncle introduced my mom to drugs, and to fill this void, that's what she relied on. My mom did not tell anyone about her being molested. This is something that she buried, that she kept hidden. My dad was born in Alabama and he lived down there for a few years. He is an only child and my grandmother raised him. My dad's father was not in his life, and my grandmother did remarry, but his stepfather was not in his life actively either. My dad's always trying to, fit in. Did things because he was trying to be cool. When my father was first introduced to drugs, he was introduced to weed, and he smoked weed because he wanted to be cool and everybody else was doing it. For my dad, as time went on, he continued to experiment with drugs. And before you know it, he's 17 and now he's using drugs and having sex, and then has a baby. And that's my dad's oldest daughter. At this point, my father had no idea what it meant to be a parent. The only example he said that he got was from TV. And he said back then, he knew he was a father, obviously, because there was evidence that he was a father. He had a daughter. But what it takes to be a parent, no idea. He had no clue whatsoever. Both of my parents lived in the projects. Same neighborhood. Knew some of the same folks before they got together. By this time, my mom has 2 children, my older sister and my oldest brother on my mom's side. And then my dad had 2 children, my older sister, and I have an older brother on my dad's side. When my parents met one another, they were already using drugs. One did not influence the other. They were what you will call functioning drug users. So my mom and dad meet, they're together, they're using drugs together. My dad is working, he's holding a job. My mom is a stay-at-home mom. Now enters the 1980s when the crack epidemic began. So now my parents are experimenting and using crack. At this point, my parents' drug addiction began to get worse. Enters 1986 and I was born. I was the baby at that time. So my siblings were between 8 and 10 years older than me. I really couldn't hang out with them and do stuff with them because they were older and had their own friends. My brother would spend a lot of time with his aunt, and my sister was in sports and she was great. So now our house became the house where everybody came to stay because my parents were actively using drugs. My sister even told me a memory where one time my uncle stole Christmas from us. Stole everything so he can get high. It was a lot going on. At home, I remember locked doors because my parents were using drugs. School was a place where I was able to, shine and kind of come out my shell, but I was still a bit reserved. I was a really smart student, honor roll all the time, awards. I was what you call back then the teacher's pet. But I was always a very helpful student. I was born. We didn't live in the projects anymore. We moved from the projects to another side of the city in these townhouses. So in public housing, what they was doing was they were moving people out of the projects and they were building developments where they can move them. So we moved from the projects into the townhouses. So it's like a strip of townhouses, and the neighbors looked out for one another. Back then, community was community. Like, you knew your neighbors. My immediate next door neighbor was the Taylor family. They loved on me, took care of me. Like, whenever I needed something, they were there. From doing my hair, keeping me active. We had a neighborhood step team. To the opposite side of my house, another family. Her name was Miss Nellie. She was Puerto Rican and she was amazing. She would always make sure that we have food in the house, and that if she was cooking, it was always extra for us. She was super sweet. And then down the street, we had my sister's boyfriend at the time, but currently he's her husband. His family, the Smith family. The Smith family was extremely supportive and encouraging and always there for me, and whatever way that I needed. Like, growing up, that was family. In the neighborhood, although my parents were still using drugs, we had community. They still looked out for my family. My parents continue to struggle with their drug use in the 80s. And although I don't remember every single moment from my childhood, I do remember big changes. Like when my grandparents, my nana and my grandmother, they will be taking turns to come stay with us. I told you I have an older sister and an older brother. I don't know how they dealt with my mom's drug use, but I do know that they reacted differently. My sister had sports. She was a basketball player, bomb basketball player. So she dove into that. My brother will go stay with his aunt. But my sister, being the oldest, she still was the parent. She still had to make sure that, we were okay. Although my grandparents will come and stay with us, I remember those moments. My sister, making sure I did my homework, her walking me to school, her picking me up from school. Like, I remember those things. And she did her best to make sure that was shielded in a way, if that makes sense. So I didn't see the things, but because I'm the baby, I'm very observant. I'm paying attention. So I know stuff is happening. My dad and mom got married, and my dad still kept a job, but he still was a drug addict. And one day at work, he got injured. And he told me that he wanted to die. And he rather die so he wouldn't get high. That's the hold that it had on him. It was becoming a big problem because my dad is the breadwinner in the home. They're using all the money to get high. And my dad went to his supervisor at that job that he was, and he told him that he needed help. He went home to tell my mom, and she wasn't with him. So with the help of my dad's employer, he went into rehab. He stayed for 30 days. And for 30 days, he stayed clean. And after that, he relapsed. So my dad admitted to my grandmother that he was addicted to drugs. When he admitted it to himself that this was a problem, he struggled to try to stay clean. Then 1990 came, and my mother got pregnant with my twin brother. So not the baby anymore. And when my mom got pregnant, she got clean. But once they were born and things were okay, my parents relapsed again. So now there's 5 kids in the house. My sister is about to graduate from high school, and during that time my mom went back into rehab. For my sister, it was like a piece for her because she struggled with my mom's drug use the longest. I'm just gonna go back for a minute. My dad said in the 80s my mom and him gave their life to Christ. And although they gave their life to Christ, they still struggle with their drug addiction. My mom's mother, my nana, was Jewish. Remember when we would go to church with nana, we'd be going to the synagogue, and we went on Saturdays. And I ain't like it because that's when my cartoons came on. But when we would visit my father's mother, my grandmother, we would go to church. And it's actually the church that I grew up in, and that I will continue to grow in my faith there. One day, my dad had a heart-to-heart conversation with God. In our neighborhood, around the corner was a park. And he said he went to that park and he pleaded out to God to remove the drugs from his life. Now he said God didn't answer that prayer immediately because right after that prayer, he still struggled. But he knew that he was ready to get clean. In 1992, my dad stopped using drugs, and he started going to NA meetings. Now, my parents were married, and in their relationship there was also infidelity. My mom had an affair, my dad had an affair. At this point, not only hurting themselves with the drugs, but they were also hurting each other in their relationship. So my sister got accepted to Virginia State University, and in 1994 she went off to college. By this time, my dad is 2 years clean, and my mom is still struggling. My grandmother, my dad's mom, came to stay with us during that time. She was real hands-on and helpful, but back then my grandmother was mean, okay? But my mom continued to struggle, and my sister's boyfriend back then, her husband now, he will check in with my sister, let her know what was going on. I was always down the street at the Smith's house. Always, okay? That was like my home away from home, and now they're family. So I always had a home away from home. Basketball and school was a lot for my sister, and then also my mom's drug use was getting worse. So my sister did not complete college. She left her third year, and she was also worried about my mom. My mom would go on these drug binges. Some days she wouldn't even come home. I knew things were wrong. I just didn't understand why. Like, why this was such a struggle for my mom. My sister left school. She's back home. And then my dad left. And I even had to have a conversation with him about this. Because my dad said when he left, he said, I left you in care of your mom. But that's not how I saw it. What I saw was him leaving. Like, now my sister is taking care of me. Now my sister is making sure we got clean clothes and we ate and homework is done. And, you know, it's because now it's not just me, it's me and my twin brothers. My sister was barren. And I even talked to my sister about this as well. My sister never really had a childhood. In school, high school, she had sports, and that was her escape. But she was always worried about my mom. She wanted me and my little brothers to have a better life. My older brother had already left. Now he's staying with his aunt permanently. And my sister is just tired. She's tired of the environment, and she wants change for us. She was saving so we can get our own place. But then something happened, and it changed everything. One day, my mom asked me to go to the store. She gave me a note, go to the store, give it to the clerk. The clerk will give you what I'm ordering, and you bring it back to me. I went to the corner store, got the package, curious to see what's in the package. I peeked. I ain't had no business looking in that bag, but I looked anyway. I'm walking to my mom's bedroom to give her the package, and my sister caught me. What you doing? I said, I'm on my way to give mommy her stuff. Sister snatched the bag from me and went upstairs, and I never heard my sister yell and scream at my mom like that. My sister was livid. She came downstairs, told me to go outside and play. I went outside. But that day, I knew my life was going to change. I knew that we weren't going to be able to stay with mommy anymore, because my mom just sent me down the street to pick up her drugs. And my sister said enough is enough. My dad left, and he stayed clean and sober. He will come through to check on us occasionally, but the visits will be filled with broken promises, because he will come through and say he'll do something. He'll come get me, or he'll buy me some clothes or something that I needed, and he wouldn't come through. But when he did visit one time, he was with his girlfriend and her daughter. That crushed my spirit, because for me, outside looking in, it looks like you left me and now you're with them and they're your new family, and you don't want me, and you left me here with my mom, knowing what was going on. Planted in my mind, he doesn't want me. So now I feel rejected. Now I feel abandoned. And then on the other hand, mom is struggling so bad. It's nothing I can do to help. Why can't she get better? Why can't we stay with mommy? Like, what? It's like my parents chose their situations over me. My mom struggling with drug use, and my dad trying to survive to stay clean. I understand now, as this adult, 37 years old, why he had to remove himself. But back then, I was 8. I didn't understand why you left. You didn't get a a sit down meet to say, this is what's going on, this is why I'm leaving. That wasn't the case. So after that moment, my sister made the decision that it was time for us to go. But before we can go, she had to talk to my dad. Dad was staying with my grandmother, and she went to him. My dad said it was about 11 p.m. Dad woke up and was like, has to be something wrong that someone's here this late. And my sister was telling him how bad things were getting and that she was taking us, but she wanted his permission first. And my dad said in that moment, he knew that it was time for him to step up. And he told my sister, I'll handle it. I'll take him. For me, it felt like if my sister didn't go to him, he wouldn't have came. And even though my dad was surviving, staying clean, doing what he was supposed to do, going to his NA meetings and getting his life together, he wasn't nurturing the relationship with his kids. Remember, it's me and my twin brother, so that's 3 kids with my mom, but he had 2 kids prior to meeting my mom. So his drug addiction didn't allow him to nurture the relationship with his kids. And now that he's clean, he's still not nurturing the relationship with his kids. He said he's now aware of the harm that caused, because for him, he was doing what he needed to do to survive. But from the perspective of his children, we were alone. You left us. And I can't speak for all my siblings, but for me, that's how I felt. Although I was young when I developed that feeling, those were thoughts that haunted me. And then my mom, why are you choosing drugs over me? Why don't you want to feel better? This is where the seeds of abandonment and rejection would take root in my life. My dad said for a long time he'd been dragging his feet with this whole situation. But it wasn't until my sister knocked on his door at 11 p.m. that night. My dad said that was his wake-up call. It was time for him to step up for his kids. And he got custody of me and my twin brothers. We would leave the townhouses and move in with my dad and my grandmother.